Welcome to Positive Path, a podcast ministry of Unity of San Antonio. Reverend Nina Clark, our senior minister, extends an invitation for you to join us in person on Sundays at 11 o'clock. Unity of San Antonio is a progressive spiritual community where everyone is welcome to attend and serve. We have many opportunities for you to get plugged in, including an active youth and family ministry, classes and workshops, fellowship after church, and many more fun events throughout the year. For more information, check out our website at unityofsa.org. Now, let's get into this week's message.
For the past 3 Sundays, we've been talking about the ideas that Eric Butterworth puts forth in his book, Spiritual Economics. And while the book is titled Spiritual Economics, and most of the examples do relate primarily to a financial abundance, everything that is said within the pages can be translated truly to any area of our life in which we would like to see something that currently isn't there. So he started us off with this idea of universal substance, this idea that there is this cosmic stuff that is everywhere present and out of which everything that is created arises. Quantum science calls this universal substance the quantum field or the infinite ocean of consciousness. Those of us who are spiritually inclined call it life, love, presence, wisdom, God. It is the infinite intelligence of the universe, that which creates and holds planets in orbit, that which causes an acorn to grow into an oak tree or a caterpillar to turn into a butterfly. And for those of us with a religious upbringing, this can sound either kind of odd or downright blasphemous. I wasn't raised in any particular faith tradition, and yet when I first heard God likened to this universal substance, I even kind of felt this inner flinch. This idea that, I think it's because this idea that God is this great being that is up in the sky somewhere separate from us is very pervasive. But if we're willing to be open-minded, we can come to see this oneness for the truth it is, and that this is what Yeshua was teaching. When modern biblical scholars began to take a look at the translations of Scripture and retranslating it from Aramaic, it became clear that mistranslations were actually very common. Take, for example, the retranslations of what we know as the Lord's Prayer. So this, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Is that familiar to many of you? When it's retranslated from the Aramaic, it becomes this: O cosmic birther of all radiance and vibration, soften the ground of our being and carve out a space within us where your presence can abide. Or this, because Aramaic is a very fluid language. It can also be translated, creator of the shimmering sound that touches us. Help us breathe one holy breath, feeling only you. This creates a shrine inside, in wholeness. Even Paul wrote in Acts, in him we live and move and have our being. There is only one God substance, and that which we call God has created this incredible, stunningly beautiful, awe-inspiring universe out of itself. And as divine offspring of this divine substance, we too can create a life of wonder and meaning. The lives that we live are created by what we consistently hold in thought and belief, both consciously and unconsciously. All thought is creative. This is universal spiritual law. Everything that people have created has its origins in thought. The chair that you're sitting on right now started as a thought in someone's mind for some purpose. Ricky's keyboard and Mike's guitar Both started as a thought in someone's mind. Airplanes began as a desire to soar above the clouds. Boats were created in response to a desire to cross bodies of water or to find bigger and better fish. And these creations likely all began small, with a desire that slowly evolved into a tangible creation. With the question, how could I? And our renovated community cafe is a good example of this process. It began as a desire to have a more welcoming space and evolved to the form that you are currently enjoying. And I really hope that you'll join us on June 1st for the grand opening. We will be expressing our deep gratitude on that day for the tireless and creative team that took it from vision to manifestation. You see what I just did? I inserted an announcement. So, this is how spiritual law works, not by sneaking in an announcement. Going from vision to manifestation. But there's a caveat, and that is if each thought was powerful enough on its own to create, we'd have all kinds of things popping in and out of existence. Can you imagine a nursery room? Legos, dinosaurs, everything popping in and out. It is sustained thought combined with emotion and faith that creates. Every one of us wants something in our lives that we don't have today. If we are not living lives that are joyful and fulfilling, it's because we're under the influence of habits of thought or beliefs that aren't in alignment with the life that we want to live. And we can either continue to allow those thoughts to run the show, or we can take charge. What we want to experience in our lives begins with us. We can change our thoughts and beliefs. The question is, are we willing to leave our comfort zone in order to create a magnificent life? Butterworth offers visualization as a means of helping us create a life experience that we'd like to have. And he encourages us to get centered, to really get centered in that truth that we are made out of universal spiritual substance, and then to visualize from that consciousness, seeing ourselves as successful in whatever it is we endeavor to do. He uses the example of athletes who have used visualization to improve their game. Over and over in their minds, they see themselves making a basket. And they did an experiment for 30 days where for an hour a day, these athletes would envision hitting a basket over and over again. And then another group did it they actually did it. They physically went out and shot hoops for the same amount of time, an hour a day for 30 days. And when the visualization group was compared against the ones who actually did the baskets, made the baskets physically, their improvement rate was only 1% less. Isn't that amazing? Visualizing something was almost as complete, as effective as actually doing it. They literally visualized themselves into improved play. And we can do the same. If you're in sales, see customers happily signing sales contracts. If you're a dentist, see smiling patients crowding your waiting room. If you're an artist, imagine the free flow of creative ideas materializing on canvas after canvas. And if you want to be or are a writer, see yourself autographing books during a successful book tour. And when we do this, we infuse our visualization with the power of our feeling. How does it feel to have an abundance of love in our lives? How does it feel to be successful? How does it feel to be in that creative flow? And as we do this, the universal substance fills in this mold that we are creating. And we do this with as much faith as we can muster at this point in time. And as I've said before, I like to think of faith as having that same confidence that you do when you walk in a room to flip the light switch. You don't even give it a second thought. You just flick the switch and expect the light to come on. There is no doubt. Imagine having that level of confidence that when you align your consciousness with something, it must reveal itself. Wouldn't that be a great feeling? And we can cultivate that in ourselves. Gratitude is an expression of that faith, of that level of faith. Gratitude is meant to be causative, not reactive. Not that it's not a good thing to express gratitude when someone takes us to lunch or gives us a gift. Please continue to say thank you. But gratitude is really a way of being. And there are several stories where Yeshua ben Joseph simply gives thanks, knowing that the outcome is done, because he knows without a shadow of a doubt that the law always, always works. He lived in a state of gratitude, knowing that he was immersed in limitless substance, always. And Rumi did as well. And you can feel his gratitude in his poetry. And I'll share this. I shared this a couple weeks ago. I'll share it again. The source is within you, and this whole world is springing up from it. The source is full. Its waters are ever flowing. Do not grieve. Drink your fill. Don't ever think it will run dry. This is the endless ocean. Can't you just feel the gratitude oozing from his words? And so, armed with this new conviction that there is a universal substance that follows reliable laws, such as we can create our lived experience with a combination of thought, emotion, and faith, Butterworth turns us loose in the world. And he tells us that if we want to have enduring success that is graced with a peaceful heart and delight, it won't happen by chasing it in the external world, but instead by seeing ourselves in that place of success and aligning ourselves with principle, opening to the flow of substance and allowing ourselves to be guided by divine wisdom. When my son was quite little, he decided he wanted his own little business. And a lemonade stand wasn't going to work because only about 5 or 6 cars passed by every day. We talked about a variety of ideas, but none seemed quite right. But he knew without a doubt that he would have his own little business. And then one day we were visiting a friend, and his mom mentioned that she had mistletoe growing all over her property. And she was thinking of hanging a lot, by her front door for the upcoming holiday. And she was talking about having someone come in and actually remove some of it. But she mentioned, the right person could probably make a bit of money by making fresh mistletoe decorations. And my son's eyes lit up. That was it. We proceeded to gather mistletoe on her property, went back with a trunk full, bought some red ribbon, and spent hours assembling the little bunches. And we set up outside our local grocery store, and who could resist a cute 4-year-old selling mistletoe? He made a bunch of moolah. But he started with a desire, filled it with expectation and excitement, and trusted that it would unfold. The universe responded with an idea that not one of us would have come up on our own. There was no mistletoe in the living room when we were brainstorming. As we practice putting these principles into action in our lives, we also invariably bump into internal objections. Has anybody had that happen? Okay. I know it's happened to me. Our ego doesn't relish change. And in order to make way for the new, we do have to clear out the old. And so if you either are starting this work from a place of being in a pickle, or if you encounter one as we are exploring these ideas together, Butterworth gives us this idea. In the face of any challenge, affirm, I accept the reality of this situation, but not its permanence. I accept the reality of this situation, but not its permanence. By continuing to deepen our new way of thinking, this too shall pass. When we allow old limiting beliefs to play over and over like a broken record in our minds, we're kind of like a cart horse with blinkers on. We can't see the fields of luscious grass flowing by on either side of the road. We only see the dirty gray cobblestones that are in front of us. It's kind of like walking around with a big old pipe over our heads, but we have our finger jammed into it so that nothing but a trickle can flow out. And it's our own finger of limiting beliefs jamming it up with thoughts like, I can't afford it. Nothing ever works out for me. I'm not lucky, and on and on. I could never do this, or whatever, on and on. If we were only to remove our finger, abundance would flow into our lives. When I first began to break free of some of my limited programming, the first thing that I would say with regards to finances, rather than I can't afford this, was, this isn't currently in my budget. And after a while, I moved on to, I choose not to spend my money in this way today. And as I practiced this new language, I realized that often the thing that I coveted so strongly, I no longer even wanted a few days or sometimes even a few hours after I had seen it or purchased it. And it became clear that sometimes my desire to have that something was actually a manifestation of my lack consciousness, which drained my bank account and kept that feeling of lack alive and my house filled with things I didn't really want. It was a vicious cycle. That realization allowed me to start bypassing purchasing items that I didn't really want, and soon my bank account began to grow along with my faith in these teachings. Fear of failure is something else that might surface as you try on this new way of being. But failure is only a part of life, and it's actually a vital part of achieving success. Failure will happen, but is it truly failure, or is it learning? I once read that it is the rare entrepreneur who hasn't declared bankruptcy at least once. They don't look at it as failure, however. It's kind of like the story of Edison of inventing the first light bulb. The first 1,000 light bulbs didn't work. Was that 1,000 failures? Edison didn't think so. He said, I discovered 1,000 ways that it didn't work. He eliminated all the ways that didn't work until he found the one that did. And if he'd gotten caught up in a failure mentality, going, I'm just failing, can you imagine after 50 tries? I'm just not, he would have stopped. Somebody else maybe would have invented the light bulb later, but he would have given up. But because he refused to entertain the mentality of failure, he just said, well, I discovered another way that didn't work. We can do the same thing, and just by making that small shift in our minds from failure or mistake to, I learned something new today, we can start moving our consciousness into a better position. For example, we often tend to say, I've got a problem. This evokes a certain feeling in us, usually related to the degree of difficulty. It might even bring up feelings of helplessness or despair, and almost certainly a thought of, I wish this wasn't happening. I think viewing the situation from the perspective of problem almost always puts some degree of victimhood on it. And then we evolved and we thought, I think it will be better for us to say, I've got a challenge. This was a step in the right direction, but if you think about it, and if you kind of say that word to yourself, it still feels like we have something to kind of confront or overcome. If, however, we use the word project, this leaves us with a completely different connotation, and typically one that is more positive, and we might even get excited about working on it. Same situation, just different words. And of course, this has nothing to do with the words themselves, just the meaning that we've attached to them through our race consciousness and societal conditioning. As I was preparing to dissolve my marriage, I was fearful about how I was going to make ends meet. And this was a problem mindset. And from there, I could not see a clear path. But when I shifted my mindset from one of a problem of finances to how am I going to make this work, ideas began to flood my experience, and it became fun to figure it out, and such a joy when solutions made themselves apparent. Butterworth writes, "The incident is external. The reaction is always your own." A financial crisis may have occurred, and it may appear that you are at the bottom financially, but it is still out there. All that really counts is what is happening within you. How are you reacting to the experience? For within you is a limitless unborn potential of creativity and substance, and the present experience can be your great opportunity to give birth to it. The tragedy can become a blessing, the disadvantage can become an advantage, the failure can become an opportunity, and the disappointment can become God's appointment. No matter what is happening in the outer world, we always, always, always have full access to wisdom and creativity, which can light our path into a new and more wonderful experience. The last thing we'll look at today is the notion of security, because many of us carry the belief that money is what makes us feel secure. If we have enough money, we will feel secure. But is this really true? I know many people who have oodles and oodles of money who live in fear of one thing or another, and certainly of losing their money. Butterworth says security will not be found in things. And the word secure comes from the words sa and cura, which originally meant free from care. So Butterworth says security is more psychological than financial. Whatever financial measures we take, if we are motivated by fear or anxiety, then we mine our roadway into the future with booby traps. It depends on what we're thinking when we do what we do. It depends on what we're thinking when we do what we do. And so questions often arise when we're doing this kind of work. Well, is buying insurance or putting money away in a savings account or investing in an IRA indicative of lack consciousness? And his answer is, it depends on what you're thinking when we do what we do. When we lean into the awareness of the allness of substance, we become a channel for the flow of infinite mind. And it is here that we feel secure. And from this place of inner security, we are guided to make decisions about investments and insurance and savings that aren't lined with fear. For example, rather than having an emergency fund, when you think about emergency fund, how does that vibrate inside of you? Do you feel any feelings of kind of like, ooh, I'm saving for, I know something bad's going to happen, so I'm kind of getting ready for it. Or we can have a savings account for a rainy day. It means we know a rainy day is going to happen, so we're going to be ready for it. How about creating an opportunity fund? This will allow you to take advantage of wonderful opportunities when they arise. And maybe that opportunity would be a new water heater. And maybe that opportunity would be a friend says, I'm traveling to Rome. Can you join me? Yes, I have an opportunity fund. Or maybe a friend says, I'm having a hard time. I'd love it if you could come visit me. And you say, yes, because you have an opportunity fund. Your abundance is not out there somewhere. It is within you, and you hold the key. I'm going to end with Butterworth's closing words for chapter 8. He says, I am secure, for I know who I am, a richly endowed child of God. I am secure in all I do, for I know my oneness with the divine process. I am secure in all I have, for I know my treasure is in my mind, not in my things. I live my life from day to day as if God's supportive substance were as exhaustless and dependable as the air I breathe, which it most certainly is.
Thank you for listening today. I want to invite you to check out our Positive Path meditations. You can take a listen anytime you need to recenter and realign. Have a wonderful day.